You click to uncover if Caligula was truly mad or a twisted mastermind, and in the next few minutes, we're dissecting the reign of Rome's most infamous emperor. Get ready for a shocking journey into absolute power and utter depravity. After the grim isolation of Tiberius, Rome welcomed Caligula with open arms, the charming young heir. But that embrace quickly turned to terror. Our guide through this nightmare? Suetonius's Lives of the 12 Caesars, an ancient exposé revealing the brutal truth behind the rumors. Did Caligula really make his horse a consul, or was that a calculated insult to the Senate? Did his madness serve a darker, more rational purpose? We'll dive into the emperor who declared war on the sea, committed unspeakable acts, and demanded worship as a living god. Was he truly insane, or was every outrageous act a terrifying display of unchallengeable authority? Suetonius's unfiltered account reveals a man who pushed the boundaries of power and sanity further than any before him. If you're ready to explore the chilling intersection of power, madness, and manipulation in ancient Rome, you're in the right place. Stick around to decide, truly mad or a terrifying genius. Before we unravel Caligula's legacy, please hit that like button, tell us your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more unforgettable historical explorations. Caius Caesar Caligula. Caius Caesar, better known as Caligula, was the son of Germanicus, the celebrated general and son of Drusus and Antonia the Younger. Germanicus, after being adopted by his uncle Tiberius, was elevated to quaestor 5 years before he was of legal age, and shortly after completing that office, he became consul. Sent to lead the army in Germany, Germanicus restored discipline among the legions, who, upon Augustus's death, initially refused to acknowledge Tiberius as emperor and instead offered to install Germanicus as their leader. His steadfastness and devotion stood out during this tense episode. Soon after, he defeated the enemy and earned a triumph. Before serving his second consulship, he was dispatched eastward, where he conquered the Armenian king and turned Cappadocia into a Roman province. He died at Antioch at 34, suspected of poisoning. Notably, his corpse bore unusual signs. The heart was found intact among the ashes, a condition said to be typical of poisonings. Rumor held that Tiberius, via his Syrian prefect Gnaeus Piso, orchestrated Germanicus's death. Piso openly insulted Germanicus with bitter abuse even as the general fell ill. Upon returning to Rome, Piso narrowly escaped being torn apart by an enraged populace and was condemned to death by the Senate. Germanicus was widely admired for physical and mental excellence. Handsome, brave, eloquent in Greek and Latin, and deeply humane. Though his legs were slender, tame exercise on horseback corrected this. In battle, he often fought and killed in single combat. Even after his triumph, he continued pleading cases. He authored Greek comedies, an unusual achievement for a Roman of his stature. Traveling humbly, he refused lictors' protection in allied cities and honored renowned tombs with offerings to the underworld gods. After the Varus disaster, he gathered and buried the scattered remains of fallen legionaries himself, an act highlighting his empathy. Despite Piso's harsh treatment of Germanicus's associates, Germanicus bore no grudge until magical curses and spells were directed against him, after which he broke friendship ties, urging his servants to avenge if necessary. His virtues made him beloved. Augustus, uncertain whether to name him successor, ultimately instructed Tiberius to adopt him. His popularity was immense. Crowds sometimes endangered his safety on arrival or departure, and on his return from pacifying Germanic mutinies, all Praetorian cohorts marched out to greet him, ignoring explicit orders limiting escort. The whole city, men and women of all ages and ranks, thronged 20 miles from Rome to welcome him. At Germanicus's death, public grief soared. On the day he died, temples were pelted with stones, altars destroyed, household gods thrown into the streets, and newborns abandoned. Even warring barbarian nations ceased hostilities, mourning him as a shared loss. Some petty kings shaved their beards and wives' heads, and the Parthian king halted hunting and feasting, equivalent to a national mourning. In Rome, slum and city alike were thrown into distress upon news of his illness. A false rumor of recovery triggered impromptu public prayers at the Capitol, nearly forcing doors open. Tiberius, awakened by joyful street songs praising Germanicus's safety, soon learned of his death. Grief endured through December holidays, while the subsequent horrors under Tiberius only enhanced Germanicus's revered memory. Many believed fear of him had restrained Tiberius's cruelty. Germanicus married Agrippina, Marcus Agrippa and Julia's daughter, bearing 9 children. 2 died in infancy, another in early childhood. A youthful son's statue, cast as Cupid, was placed by Livia in the Venus temple on the Capitol, while Augustus kept another statue in his bedroom, kissing it often. The surviving children included daughters Agrippina, Drusilla, and Livilla, and sons Nero, Drusus, and Caius Caesar. Nero and Drusus were later declared enemies by Tiberius. Caius Caesar was born August 31st, the day before the calends of September, during his father's consulship with Caius Fonteius Capito. His precise birthplace is debated, with claims ranging from Tibur to a Treveri village named Ambiatinus, supported by local altars honoring Agrippina's childbirth. Another suggestion from public records places his birth at Antium, the seaside town he favored. Pliny charges claims of his birth in the Treviri region as forgery, meant to flatter the young prince's prestige. The inscription and verses supporting the Treviri origin are weak evidence, as the Acts show Germanicus was in Gaul after Caius's birth, and Agrippina bore daughters in the same area, with puerperium used generically for childbirth. Augustus's letters about Caius confirm his movements consistent with a coastal Roman birth. Caius's affection for Antium and wish to move the imperial seat there further validate this. Caius gained the nickname Caligula, or Little Boots, from soldiering days spent among troops. His upbringing in military garb earned him soldiers' affection, apparent during the mutiny after Augustus's death, quelled only once he was sent to safety. This devotion reached such heights that when troops realized he was sent away, they begged to keep him near. He accompanied Germanicus to Syria, later living with his mother until her banishment, then with his great-grandmother Livia Augusta. After her death as a boy, he gave her funeral oration at the rostra. He was then brought up by his grandmother Antonia. At 20, called by Tiberius to Capri, he adopted manhood and shaved his beard in one day, but without honors given to his brothers. There, conspiracies tried to trick him into accusations against Tiberius, but he remained cautious. He pretended indifference to relations' mistreatment and showed outward obedience to his grandfather and courtiers, earning the proverb, "Never a better servant, nor a worse master." But his cruel and lustful nature soon emerged. Caligula enjoyed witnessing punishments and frequented taverns and brothels disguised at night in wigs and long coats. He loved theatrical singing and dancing. Tiberius tolerated these excesses, hoping they might soften his rough temper. He often warned, saying, "Caius is destined to ruin himself and all mankind, a hydra for Rome and a phaeton for the world." Caligula married Junia Claudia, daughter of Marcus Silanus of high rank. He was appointed augur, then pontifex before inauguration, praised for duty and intelligence. With Sejanus's fall, court politics shifted, and he was increasingly flattered as Tiberius's successor. After Claudia's death in childbirth, Caligula began a scandalous affair with Ennia Nerevia, wife of Macro, the Praetorian prefect, promising marriage upon his future imperial ascension through oaths and written vows. Some suggest he tried to poison Tiberius and even strangled him with a pillow while he slept, killing a freedman for protesting. Later, Caligula allegedly confessed to an attempted assassination of Tiberius, abandoning the effort out of pity, noting that Tiberius knew yet dared not retaliate. With imperial power secured, Caligula fulfilled Romans' hopes, Indeed, those of much of humanity. His childhood and family ties made him beloved across the provinces and Rome, linked to Germanicus's memory and the survival of a nearly destroyed family. When he left Myzina mourning and following Tiberius's funeral, vast crowds accompanied him, calling him nicknames such as their star, their chick, pretty puppet, and bantling. Upon his city entry, the Senate disregarded Tiberius's will, leaving the minor co-heir aside, and invested full government authority in Caligula. Public joy soared, with sacrifices exceeding 160,000 within 3 months. He soon toured nearby Campanian islands, receiving vows for safe return, and citizens waded through nights in prayer and contest promises for his recovery. Foreign respect abounded. Even Artabanus, Parthian king and traditional enemy of Tiberius, sought friendship, meeting his lieutenant, paying reverence to Roman standards and imperial imagery crossing the Euphrates. Caligula himself fueled this devotion by mastering the arts of popularity. After delivering a tearful eulogy for Tiberius, burying him with great ceremony, Caligula hastened to the islands of Pandataria and Pontia to bring back the ashes of his mother and brother. Despite the dangerous seas of the season, he made the voyage with great reverence, personally placing their remains in urns. He transported them in a grand procession to Ostia, flying his galley's ensign at stern, and then up the Tiber to Rome. There, esteemed equestrians bore them on 2 biers into the mausoleum at midday. He established annual public sacrifices in their honor, with Circensian games dedicated to his mother and a chariot bearing her image in the procession. He renamed September in honor of his father, calling it the month of Germanicus. A single Senate decree loaded his grandmother Antonia with all the honors ever conferred on Empress Livia. He elevated his uncle Claudius from the equestrian order to be his colleague in the consulship. On the day he assumed manhood, he adopted his brother Tiberius and named him Prince of the Youths. He ordered oaths of loyalty to include a vow never to love anyone more than Caius and his sisters, and required all Senate consular decrees to begin with a blessing upon Caius Caesar and his sisters. Caligula restored many condemned and exiled persons and granted immunity from past crimes and accusations. To protect those who testified against his mother and brothers, he burned the trial records in the forum, loudly declaring he never read them. Rejecting a memorial about his own security, he claimed he had no enemies and would not heed informers. He expelled the spintry, panderers to unnatural lusts, sparing only at last from being thrown to the sea. He allowed suppressed writings of Titus Labienus, Cordus Cremutius, and Cassius Severus to be read widely, saying it was in his interest for history to be known. He resumed public disclosure of government proceedings, a practice discontinued by Tiberius. Magistrates were granted full jurisdiction without appeals to him. Caligula carefully reviewed the Roman knights, publicly stripping disgraceful ones of horses but sparing those guilty of minor offenses. To ease judges' workload, he added a 5th class to the existing 4. He sought to restore the ancient right of people to vote in magistrate elections. He honored legacies of Tiberius and Livia, ignored by his predecessor, and remitted a 1% tax on auctions across Italy. He reimbursed fire victims and, when restoring kingdoms to princes, forgave accumulated taxes, such as Antiochus of Comagene owed 100 million sesterces. Displaying generosity, he gave a freedwoman 80,000 sesterces for refusing to expose a patron's crime despite harsh torture. For these acts, he was awarded an annual golden shield, carried to the capital with Senate and nobility singing his praises. The day he became emperor was renamed Palilia, symbolizing Rome's rebirth. Caligula held 4 consulships, the first for 2 months from July 1st, the second for 30 days from January 1st, the third until January 13th, and the fourth until January 7th, the last 2 held consecutively. He assumed the third at Lyons without arrogance. His colleague had just died, information unavailable far from Rome. He distributed 300 sesterces twice to the people and hosted lavish feasts for senators and equestrians, who received formal garments and purple scarfs. To immortalize joy, he extended Saturnalia by a day, naming it Juvenalis. Caligula staged gladiator combats at the amphitheater of Taurus or the Septa, mixing top fighters from Campania and Africa. Sometimes he presided, other times he delegated. He hosted stage plays citywide, sometimes at night, lighting all streets. He scattered gifts among the crowd and handed out baskets of bread and victuals. He once sent his share to a Roman knight sitting nearby eating, and rewarded a senator doing the same with an extraordinary praetorship. He held numerous Circensian games from dawn to night, including exotic hunts. The circus was adorned in vermilion and chrysolite. Only senators raced in chariots, with Caligula signaling starts from his viewing place. He invented unheard-of spectacles, including a 3.5-mile bridge from Baiae to Puteoli built by lining trading vessels side by side, covered with earth like a road. He crossed it twice in grand pageantry, first mounted in golden armor, crowned with oak leaves, wielding battle gear, then standing in a chariot drawn by fine horses, accompanied by a Parthian hostage and Praetorian cohorts. Many think he imitated Xerxes's famous Hellespont Bridge, while others believe it was to Germany and Britain before planned invasions. An eyewitness account tells of Thrasyllus the astrologer assuring Tiberius that Caius would never ride horseback across the Baiae Gulf, a prophecy broken by the bridge's construction. Caligula also hosted grand spectacles in Sicily, Greek games at Syracuse, Attic plays at Lyons, and eloquence contests blending Greek and Roman traditions. Poor performers faced wiping their works clean, rod beatings, or dunking in rivers. Winners received praise and rewards. He completed Tiberius's unfinished works, the Temple of Augustus and Pompey's Theater. He began an aqueduct near Tiber and an amphitheater by the Septa, one finished by Claudius, the other incomplete. He repaired Syracuse's walls and temples, planned to rebuild Polycrates's palace in Samos, completed the Didymean Apollo temple in Miletus, and founded a town in the Alps. Ambitiously, he planned an isthmus canal in Achaia, sending a centurion to survey the project. Yet, beyond the prince, Caligula became monstrous. He claimed titles like dutiful, the pious, child of the camp, father of the armies, and the greatest and best Caesar. At dinner with foreign kings boasting noble descent, he declared, Eis Coronos Edo, es Basilius, let there be but one prince, one king. He sought to wear the diadem, shift Rome's government toward monarchy, then claimed divine status. Statues of renowned gods, including Jupiter Olympus, were brought from Greece so he could replace their heads with his. He extended his palace to the Forum, converted the Castor and Pollux temple into his vestibule, and positioned himself between the twin gods to receive worship, with some addressing him as Jupiter Latialis. He built a temple for his own divinity, staffed with priests and lavish sacrifices, flamingos, peacocks, bustards, and other exotic birds. On full moon nights, he purportedly invited the moon goddess to his embraces and bed. By day, he whispered and ranted to Jupiter Capitolinus, threatening the god if unheeded until persuaded to live with him. He even built a palace bridge linking the Palladium to the Capitol and founded a palace courtyard there. Caligula disdained being called Agrippa's grandson due to obscure birth and was offended when grouped with the Caesars. He claimed his mother was the offspring of incest between Augustus and Julia. He disparaged Augustus's victories at Actium and Sicily as harmful to Rome. He dubbed his grandmother Livia Augusta Ulysses in a woman's dress, and insulted her lineage to the Senate, falsely claiming humble origins. When Antonia sought private talks, he refused unless the Praetorian prefect Macro was present. His mistreatment hastened her death, suspected poisoning. He showed no respect for her memory, watching her funeral from a distance. His brother Tiberius was suddenly executed by his order, and his father-in-law Silanus forced to commit suicide over suspicions of disloyalty, charges stemming from misinterpretations of seasickness and medical treatment. Claudius was spared only to be made a laughingstock. Caligula lived incestuously with his sisters, seating each beneath him at banquets while his wife reclined above him. One sister, Drusilla, was reportedly deflowered by him before manhood and once caught by their grandmother together. After Drusilla married a consular man, Caligula seized her as his lawful wife. She was named heiress of his estate and empire in his will. After her death, he declared public mourning so severe that laughing or bathing was forbidden, a testament to his grief. He often swore by the divinity of Drusilla in important gatherings. Other sisters were treated cruelly, frequently prostituted to his male favorites. He accused them of adultery and conspiracy in the Aemilius Lepidus affair, exposing their letters obtained through lewd means, and consecrated swords meant to kill him to Mars. His marriages were disgraceful. He abducted Livia Orestilla at her wedding to Caius Piso, later divorcing and banishing her for suspected infidelity. At the wedding feast, he quipped to Piso, "Do not be too fond of my wife." Lollia Paulina, wife of a consular general, was summoned and married for her grandmother's beauty, but soon dismissed and forbidden contact with men. Caligula bore passionate and lasting affection for Caesonia, an unremarkable woman with 3 daughters by another man but notorious for licentiousness. He often displayed her to soldiers, dressed as a soldier with shield and helmet at his side, sometimes showing her naked to friends. Upon her childbirth, he declared her his wife and the child his own, naming the baby Julia Drusilla. He paraded the child before goddesses' temples, entrusting Minerva with her upbringing. Julia's tempestuous temperament showed even in infancy, attacking children's faces and eyes with her nails. Caligula incited this devotion by employing every art of popularity. After delivering a flood of tears in praise of Tiberius and burying him with great ceremony, he hastened to the islands of Pandataria and Pontia to fetch his mother's and brother's ashes. Despite perilous seas, he made the journey with deep reverence, personally placing the urns with their remains. Their procession to Ostia featured galley ensigns flying, and equestrians bore the biers up the Tiber to Rome, entering the mausoleum at midday. He established annual public offerings in their honor, added Circensian games for his mother, and included a chariot bearing her image in the procession. In the month of September he was renamed Germanicus, to honor his father. By Senate decree, he accorded his grandmother Antonia all the honors ever given to Empress Livia. His uncle Claudius was elevated from equestrian to consul colleague. Caligula adopted his brother Tiberius on the day he assumed manhood, bestowing the title Prince of the Youths. Oaths of allegiance he mandated to include loyalty to him and his sisters, and consular senate measures were prefaced with blessings for their well-being. He restored exiles and granted indemnities against former accusations. To protect informers against his family, he publicly burned trial records in the forum, loudly swearing he never read them. When offered a memorial about his security, he refused, claiming he made no enemies and had no ears for informers. Caligula banished the Spintrii, panderers of unnatural lusts, though he was dissuaded from drowning them. He revived the reading of band writings by Titus Labienus, Cremutius Cordus, and Cassius Severus, stating it was to his advantage to preserve historical events for posterity. He resumed public reporting of government proceedings, a practice dropped by Tiberius, and granted magistrates unappealable jurisdiction. He conducted a measured review of the Roman knights, stripping from them privileges only for grave dishonor, sparing those guilty of minor faults. To lighten judicial burdens, he added a 5th class to the knights. He attempted to revive popular voting rights for magistrates. He honored legacies annulled by Tiberius and Livia, remitted a 1% auction tax, compensated many fire victims, and forgave tax arrears when restoring kingdoms. To encourage virtue, he rewarded a freedwoman generously for not betraying her master despite torture. For these acts, he received a golden shield annually carried in a procession of praise attended by senators and noble youth. The day of his accession was renamed Palilia, symbolizing Rome's renewal. Caligula held 4 consulships, serving from July for 2 months, then January for 30 days, followed by 2 successive terms until early January. Though some think arrogance prompted his 3rd consulship at Lyons, it was due to his colleague's death being unknown so far away. He twice gave the people 300 sesterces each, and hosted splendid banquets for senators and equestrians, who received toga garments and purple scarfs. He added a day to Saturnalia, called Juvenalis. He staged gladiator combats mixed with renowned pugilists, sometimes presiding personally, other times delegating. He showcased theatrical plays citywide, occasionally by night, illuminating whole streets. He distributed food and gifts freely. Once, he sent his share to a Roman knight dining nearby, and rewarded a senator eating the same with a special praetorship. His Circensian games spanned dawn to dusk with exotic hunts and colorful pageantry. The circus was lavishly decorated, and only senators competed in chariot races, starting on his signal. Among his novel spectacles, he built a 3.5-mile bridge between Baiae and Puteoli. He lined ships side by side, covered them with earth, and traveled back and forth across it on horseback and in a chariot attended by soldiers and friends. Some saw this as an imitation of Xerxes's Hellespont Bridge, others as preparation to intimidate Britain and Germany. Thrasyllus the astrologer had once predicted Caius would not ride across Baiae, underscoring the event's irony. Caligula entertained in Sicily, Syracuse, and Gaul with games, plays, and eloquence contests where poor performers were punished severely. He completed Tiberius's unfinished works, including the Temple of Augustus and Pompey's theater, began Tiber's aqueduct and an amphitheater near the Septa, repaired Syracuse's walls and temples, started palace and temple projects across the provinces, and planned an isthmus canal in Achaia. Yet, he was no ordinary prince. He adopted titles like Dutiful, the Pious, Child of the Camp, and Greatest and Best Caesar. At a banquet where kings boasted lineage, he declared Eis Coronos Ito, Eis Basilius, let there be but one prince, one king. He sought the diadem and royal power. Told that kings were surpassed only by himself, he claimed divine status. He replaced God's statues' heads with his own, extended his palace to the Forum, converted temples into vestibules to his home, and stationed himself between divine twins to receive worship. Some saluted him as a form of Jupiter. He built a temple dedicated to himself, with priests, choicest sacrifices, and daily ceremonies. At full moon, he claimed to embrace the goddess. By day, he whispered and ranted to the chief god, threatening to harm him until persuaded otherwise. He built bridges and palaces joining his residence to the capital. Caligula disdained his Agrippan lineage, boasting of scandalous origins and mocking Augustus's victories as harmful. He insulted his grandmother and royal ancestors, denying his grandmother Antonia private counsel except in Macro's presence. He hastened her death, possibly by poison. He ordered his brother Tiberius executed by military officers, and forced his father-in-law Silanus to suicide over mistaken suspicions. Caligula's incestuous relationships with sisters shocked all. He seated them beneath himself at feasts while his wife sat above. Drusilla, reportedly deflowered by him before manhood, was caught in his embrace by Antonia. He took her from her husband and treated her as lawful wife, naming her heiress of his empire. Upon her death, he decreed mourning so severe none might laugh or bathe. He swore by her divinity in assemblies. Other sisters he prostituted to favorites and accused of conspiracy, displaying incriminating letters and consecrating swords used in assassination plots. His marriages were infamous. At Caius Piso's wedding, he abducted and soon divorced the bride, proclaiming himself wed as Romulus and Augustus had done. He married Lollia Paulina but soon dismissed and barred her from men. He loved Caesonia, a notorious woman with children by another, frequently parading her in soldier's dress to soldiers and friends, sometimes naked. After her childbirth, he declared her his wife and the child his own, naming the baby Julia Drusilla and dedicating her to the goddess Minerva. Her wild childhood temperament foretold later turmoil. Caligula further intensified his fame by lavishly honoring his family. After delivering tearful speeches praising Tiberius and orchestrating grand funeral rites, he traveled to Pandataria and the Pontine Islands to retrieve the ashes of his mother and brother. Despite stormy seas, he journeyed with reverence, personally placing their remains into urns. The remains were transported to Ostia in a grand procession, with a galley flying its ensign, and then borne on litters by eminent equestrians through Rome to the mausoleum at midday. He instituted annual public ceremonies commemorating his family, including Circensian games and processions with chariots bearing images of his mother. He renamed September Germanicus to honor his father. The Senate lavished honors on his grandmother Antonia, equating them to those given to the Empress Livia. He made his uncle Claudius a co-consul, adopted his brother Tiberius, and bestowed titles and privileges upon his siblings, ensuring their prominence was ingrained in public oaths and Senate resolutions. Caligula reversed many of Tiberius' harsh policies, restored exiles, and granted amnesties for previous offenses. To demonstrate trust, he publicly burned charges brought against his mother and brothers, proclaiming innocence and shunning informers. Yet, his generosity extended little beyond political theater. He banished the so-called spintrii, agents of debauchery, from Rome, allowed previously banned writings to return to public libraries for posterity, and revived Senate transparency initiatives abandoned by Tiberius. Caligula affirmed judicial independence and expanded the ranks of knights, carefully culling those dishonored while sparing minor offenders. He attempted to restore popular voting rights and repaid legacies previously annulled by Tiberius. However, his generosity masked unchecked excess. He hosted lavish public games and extended the traditional Saturnalia by an additional day called Juvenalia, celebrating youth. To great spectacle, he constructed a bridge of boats spanning miles nearby, crossing it with grand pageantry, evoking wonder and mockery. His ambitions included grand architectural projects, extensive public entertainment, and military gestures. Yet these splendors scarcely veiled a darker side. He arrogantly assumed divine titles, coveted sole rulership, and defied republican norms. He transformed his palace into a shrine for himself, claimed godlike status, and demanded worship, placing himself alongside and even above the gods. His contempt for tradition and family rank ignited scandal. He insulted his ancestry, disparaged his grandmother's lineage, and alienated powerful relatives. His sexual excesses shocked Rome, involving incest, public humiliations, and cruel treatment of kin. His marriages and liaisons were notorious. He flaunted questionable relationships and assigned inappropriate titles, such as declaring a mistress his wife and elevating their child to divine status. Caligula's reign spiraled into cruelty and madness. He shamed senators through public insults and violent acts, reintroduced brutal punishments, and harassed social classes. He taxed relentlessly using novel schemes that afflicted all, inciting widespread distress. His greed and caprice seemed boundless. Ultimately, his excesses sowed his doom. He was assassinated at age 29, ending a tumultuous and infamous rule after a mere 3 years and 10 months. Yet the memory of his reign lingered as a cautionary tale of ambition, madness, and tyranny.